everyone. This is our live class makeup video for learning about our summative writing paragraph 2. So our goal for today is I can write a paragraph about a story from my past using the past tense. So today we are focusing on paragraph 2, and we'll be making sure that you guys use past tense verbs in your story. So today we're going to start with a greeting, and then we're going to move into breakout rooms where you'll practice some storytelling. We'll review past tense verbs. We'll talk about paragraph 2, and then you guys will have some work time. So can you tell me what makes a good story? We've all heard people say stories, or we've read stories and we're like, that was stupid, like that was confusing, what just happened? Versus times when we're like, oh my gosh, that story was awesome, tell it again. Like, what makes a good story? What makes you want to hear something again? For me, what makes a good story is lots of details. I like to be able to picture the story in my mind, right? Having a clear explanation of something that happened, right? And we're not talking about 1,000 different things, right? We're just talking about this one story and what happened during the story. A lot of times when I've seen students write example of a story from their life, they say like, well, one time I went to the park, and then one time I went to school, and then it's like all over the place, right? Just one smooth, consistent story. And that's what you're going to do in your paragraph that you write today. So today we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to practice sharing stories. We're going to think about stories from our lives that we're comfortable sharing with other people. And this will help us come up with things that we can write about. So since you're not here to do breakout rooms, we're going to skip going through our norms. But what I want you to think about is what kind of story you want to share. So in the breakout room, students had 10 different options for stories or to prompts to choose from. So these are all, there's 10 options here, and these are all options that you could use to share your story when you're writing, right? You could tell a story about the last time you experienced great joy, right? You could tell about a time you felt like you were a part of community. You could tell a story of a challenge you faced during your childhood, right? Read through these. These are all options you have for your story that you're writing in your paragraph, right? Practice saying it out loud to someone. When we say stories out loud to someone, that helps us preview what we need to include when we write it. If people are confused when you're saying it, telling it to them with your words by speaking it, then if you don't change anything, they're also going to be confused when they read it, right? So practice saying it. Make sure it makes sense. Make sure it has beginning, middle, end, right? Make sure that people can read it and kind of know what you're saying about. And make sure you're writing about one story. Don't tell me 10 different stories with like one sentence about all of them, right? Tell me one story with lots of details. Okay, so if you need some help coming up with ideas for what to write about from your story, take a screenshot of this slide and pick one of these 10 prompts to use for the story of for your paragraph. That would be a great way to write your paragraph. So obviously you're not here to tell me about how your story sharing went, but like I said, practice saying it either out loud to yourself or maybe to your brother or sister or parent or friend, to make sure that your story makes sense and that you can include lots of details. That's a great way to help you write, is to say it out loud before you write it. So let's go ahead and review some verbs. Remember, we've learned about verbs last week or 2 weeks ago. Verbs are our action words. They're things that you do, like you can jump, you can walk, you can sleep, you can eat, you can watch TV, right? They're things you can do. So when we're telling stories, our stories have already happened. They happened in the past. They maybe happened yesterday or this morning, or maybe they happened 10 years ago. It doesn't matter how long ago it happened, but what matters is it's in the past. When we're telling stories that happened in the past, we have to use past tense verbs. Remember that most verbs, you add an ed to the end of them to make them past tense. And we've been talking about this and working on this, right? So talk goes to talked. So you can say, like, today I talked, yesterday I talked to my friend and we talked about blah, 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 right? And you can go into a story about that. Or yesterday I watched TV and I watched 10 episodes, and you can give lots of details, right? And you got to make sure your verbs are in the past tense to match what already happened, right? Laugh to laughed, bump to bumped, and move to moved. Or maybe played or cooked, right? That we just add the ed to the end of them. But as we know, many of the verbs don't follow the rules, unfortunately. So these are irregular. So if you're going to use any of these irregular verbs in your story, you got to make sure you spell them right, or else it's not really the right word you're trying to say. So hopefully you have a screenshot of this in your iPad. If you don't, take one now. But here you can see a lot of common verbs, what they are in present tense, and then what makes them past tense, right? Are goes to were, is to was, run to ran. And then here the green is the present and the red is the past tense. So sit to sat, make to made, go to went. So if you're going to use any of these irregular past tense verbs in your story, you got to make sure you spell them right. That's part of using past tense verbs in your story. So take a screenshot, like I said, if you need that. So we have been working on our writing summative. So remember, our writing summative is like an essay where you're going to be writing 3 paragraphs. Each paragraph has a certain thing you're going to write about. And you're going to be using everything that you've learned this quarter to include it in your writing. I really want this to be the best writing you possibly can write, and I want you to show me everything you've learned during this class. So I'm talking things like complete sentences, topic sentences, detail sentences, conclusion sentences, adding adjectives, adding past tense verbs, right? All these things that we've learned, I want them to be in your writing. So what are you writing about? Well, yesterday we did paragraph 1 where you wrote about your identity. If you haven't done that assignment yet, go back, watch the makeup video, and get that assignment done. Today we're working on paragraph 2 where you're writing a story about from your life. And tomorrow we'll be working on paragraph 3 where you will write about your goals for the future. So you are graded on 4 things. So one thing you're graded on is writing rules, and then you're graded on each of the paragraphs you write to make 4. So when we talk about writing rules, I'm talking about making sure you have capital letters, that you have paragraph form. Remember, that means topic sentence, detail sentence, conclusion sentence, in that order for every paragraph. I'm talking about having periods at the ends of your sentences, writing incomplete sentences, indenting your paragraphs, and you need to have 5 to 7 sentences for each paragraph. So today we're focusing on paragraph 2. So remember, like I was saying, you get 1 point for each paragraph. So paragraph 2 is about a story from your life. Just so you know, the story does need to be school appropriate. And your paragraph needs to tell me a story, and it needs to make sense, right? You need to tell me about 1 story, not 5 stories, not something that I'm like reading it and I'm like, what is happening? What's going on? It needs to make sense, right? And that's why I was saying, practice saying your story out loud. Tell it to your brother or sister or your mom, dad, friend, or even to yourself, okay? You also need to include at least 2 adjectives in your story to add those details. And all of your verbs should be in past tense when you're talking about what happened in your story. So let's take a look at my example of my paragraph and the story that I wrote about. So notice I start with an indent, and then here's my writing. It says, here is a story from my past. I met my husband, Tyler, in college. We both went to the University of Northwestern in St. Paul, Minnesota. Tyler and I met on the first day of moving into the dorms. We were friends for a year and hung out with our other friends many times. In our second year of college, we took a class together. During that class, we talked more and would walk together after class. After class one day, Tyler asked me on a date. We got married almost 3 years later. Okay, so what is my story about? I'm telling you the story about how I met my husband and how that kind of changed so that one day when we got married, right? It's that story of how we met. And did my story make sense? I think so, right? I kind of told you how we met, um, and I gave you lots of details about when we were friends, and then we took a class together, right? And we went on dates, and then one day we got married. Okay, so see, this is what I'm looking for in your paragraph. I want you to write about one story. I need it to make sense. I want you to include lots of details. So let's check the requirements for our paragraph here. So remember, we got to follow our writing rules. So we got to look. Is the first letter of each sentence capitalized? Let's take a look. So I'm looking at the beginning of my sentences, and I'm looking to see if my letters are capitalized. So far, it looks like all of them are capitalized. Let's keep checking them. So we have the A, here's capitalized, W. So all the sentences are capitalized. So let's look at the next. Does each paragraph begin with a topic sentence? So let's see if there's a topic sentence here. So remember, a topic sentence is introducing the paragraph to what we are going to be writing about. So that's the first sentence of your paragraph, and it's kind of like that title or page of a book, and it's kind of telling us what we're going to be writing about. So this one says, "Here is a story from my past." Yeah, it's a great topic sentence. It leads you into telling you about the story. And then does it have detailed sentences in the middle, and does it end with a conclusion? So let's look at those two next. So there are lots of detailed sentences, right? Everything in the middle here, from here all the way to here, are all detailed sentences, right? Something that I didn't do that I should go back and change is I don't really have a conclusion sentence. And that's the problem, right? I just kind of end by saying, we got married 3 years later. But that doesn't really wrap up the paragraph very well. So that's something I should do better at, and I would have to go back and fix, right? So the whole point of checking with these questions is if you say no, you need to go back and fix it. So this is something I didn't do, and so it's something I should go back and fix. Now let's look. Does each sentence end with a period? Okay, let's take a look. So right before every capital letter, there should be a period. So let's double check. Yeah, it looks like so far so good. Nice job. So it looks like all of these end with a period, and you might use an exclamation point, and that's fine too. But the point is you need to have the period or exclamation point or question mark at the end. Okay, are the sentences complete sentences? They are, they make sense. We're not going to take the time to check each one. But I want us to take a look. Is the paragraph indented? And do I have at least 5 sentences? So let's go ahead and check for that indent. And we do, so that's good. We have this indent right here. Remember, indent is space, so that's good. And then we have to make sure we have at least 5 sentences. So let's go ahead and check. Let's gonna count the periods. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this paragraph has 9 sentences, and that's totally fine. We needed to have at least 5, so we did that. So now let's go ahead and let's look at these questions right here for paragraph 2. Does this paragraph tell a story about your life? Yes, it does. It tells you a story about how I met my husband. And then, does the story make sense? Yep. Does it include some adjectives? Well, that's the part that I also could have done better at. I do have some adjectives. So some adjectives I have are first, describes day. 3 describes year. Second describes year. But I could have done a lot better job giving adjectives, right? I could have described Tyler. I could say that he's tall, he has blonde hair, that he's funny, right? I could have said a lot more adjectives. So that's something I could go back and change to make better. And then last question, are these verbs in the past tense? So let's take a look at that. Let's do a dark blue. So once I start my story, all those verbs should be in the past because that's what happens. So not including the topic sentence, but once I start my story. So the word met, that's past tense, right? Went, met again, were, hung out, took, talked, asked, right? So these are all past, married. Those are all past tense verbs, okay? So that's what I'm looking for, is that when we talk about things in the past, they should have be in the past tense. And the reason why we just took the time to go through and check my writing is because that's what I want you to do with your writing, right? We found two things that I need to fix in my writing. I don't have a conclusion sentence, and I should have included maybe some more adjective to make my writing better. So when we go through and we check the writing here, we are checking to make sure we're doing the best writing we possibly can. And if we say no to any of those questions, that's when we have to go back and edit and make changes to fix our mistakes. Okay? So that's something that you're going to do now. So now we're going to move into writing time. You're going to be writing the second paragraph of your summative writing. So you are going to be writing that story about your own life. Your job is to go to Schoology, put today's worksheet into Notability. You're going to write a paragraph about a story from your life. You can write about anything you want as long as it's one story, it makes sense, and it's school appropriate. If you're having a hard time coming up with ideas, take a look at those list of questions that I showed you earlier. Maybe one of those will help you. And then what's most important here is that when you're done, you check to make sure you did everything you need to do. Take a look at those questions just like you and I did. Take a look, double check. You can use Notability to mark things up if you need to, and then you can always erase it later. And then once you've done that and you made any changes you need to do, that's when I want you to submit to Schoology. So your worksheet today, it looks like this. So you're writing the second paragraph of your writing, and this is a story about your life, okay? So up here, to make it as easy as possible, I've included all of those questions that you need to include in your writing, okay? So you can write, you're going to write your paragraph here in this box, and then when you're done, go through and check the questions up here, just like you and I did in this video. So take a look in here, double check it, and if anything says no, fix it. If you are feeling stuck and you maybe need some extra help, I want you to follow these steps that I have here at the bottom, right? Make sure you start with an indent. Then you write your first sentence of a topic sentence. I have an idea of a topic sentence right here. Just go ahead and copy it, right? So if I was you, I would, undo. I would put my indent in and I would just type it. Here is a story from my past, okay? And then tell me about your story, right? Like, one day I blah, 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 right? And then make sure you include details by adding adjectives. Make sure your verbs are in past tense. And then end with your conclusion story or conclusion sentence. So here's my story. And then I can add my conclusion. That is a story from my life, right? Or like in my story about my husband, if I went to go back and change it, I could say that is the story of how I met my husband, right? So remember, conclusion sentence just wraps it up. So you can use my example. You can change it up if you want. You can do whatever fits best for you. And then if you need an example, you can always look at my example in Schoology or in this video. So those are the steps. And if you need any help, please let me know. It's my job to help you, and I want you to get the best grade you possibly can because we're working on this as a summative, remember. So let me know, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Remember, tomorrow we're working on paragraph 3, so I hope to see you at that live class tomorrow.